David Thompson never thought his biggest problem would be finding someone to watch his children. With a net worth of $50 million from his software company, he was used to solving problems with money. Need a new car? Write a check. Want a bigger house? Call the realtor. But when it came to his 4-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas, money seemed completely useless. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. David was in his home office taking calls about a new product launch when his phone rang. It was the hospital. His wife Catherine had been in a car accident on her way to pick up groceries. The words that followed felt like they were coming from underwater. Critical condition. Life support. You need to come now. Catherine died 3 days later without ever waking up. David sat in that sterile hospital room, holding her hand and wondering how he was supposed to tell 2 4-year-olds that Mommy wasn't coming home. The twins had been staying with Catherine's mother during those awful days, and David knew he had to face them soon. When he walked into his mother-in-law's house, Lily ran to him like she always did. "Daddy, where's Mommy? Grandma said she's sleeping, but when is she coming home?" Lucas hung back, somehow sensing that something was terribly wrong. David knelt down and tried to find words that would make sense to a 4-year-old brain. "Mommy got hurt in her car," he said softly, "and the doctors couldn't make her better. She had to go to heaven." Lily's face crumpled. "But I want her to come home. I want Mommy." Lucas started crying too, even though David wasn't sure he fully understood what was happening. That night, both children crawled into David's bed and none of them slept much. The next few weeks were a blur of funeral arrangements, visitors bringing casseroles, and David trying to figure out how to be both mother and father. Catherine had handled most of the day-to-day parenting while David focused on his business. He knew the twins' favorite foods and bedtime stories, but he had no idea about nap time schedules, preschool pickup times, or how to French braid Lily's hair the way she liked it. Rosa Martinez had been cleaning the Thompson house for 3 years. She was a quiet woman in her mid-40s who came twice a week to dust, vacuum, and organize. She had watched the twins grow from toddlers to preschoolers, and they were always excited to see her. When she arrived for work the week after the funeral, the house felt completely different. David was sitting at the kitchen table in wrinkled clothes, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. Lily was under the table, refusing to come out. Lucas was in the living room throwing blocks at the wall. The house that had always been spotless and warm now felt chaotic and sad. "Mr. Thompson," Rosa said gently, "maybe I should come back another day?" David looked up at her with exhausted eyes. "No, please stay. I don't know what I'm doing. They won't eat. Lily won't get dressed. Lucas keeps asking when Mommy's coming back, and I don't know what to say anymore." Rosa had raised 4 children of her own as a single mother. She recognized the signs of children drowning in grief. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "kids need time to be sad before they can be happy again." That afternoon, Rosa worked around the chaos instead of trying to fix it. She cleaned quietly while Lily stayed under the table. She picked up the blocks that Lucas threw without scolding him. When snack time came, she simply placed goldfish crackers and apple slices where the children could reach them. Lily eventually emerged from under the table to eat. Lucas stopped throwing things and sat next to his sister. David watched this small miracle from the doorway. He had been trying so hard to make everything normal again, but Rosa seemed to understand that normal didn't exist anymore. They needed a new normal, and that would take time. Over the next month, David tried to establish routines. He hired a babysitter for when he had important meetings. He attempted to cook the foods Catherine used to make. He read bedtime stories and helped with baths, but the twins seemed to be getting worse instead of better. Lily, who had always been outgoing and chatty, became quiet and clingy. She refused to let David out of her sight and had meltdowns when he had to leave for work. Lucas, who had been the calmer of the two, started having anger outbursts that seemed to come from nowhere. He would throw toys, hit his sister, and scream until he was exhausted. The preschool teacher called regularly with concerns. Lily wasn't participating in activities. Lucas had bitten another child during snack time. Both children seemed lost and angry. and the teacher gently suggested that David might want to consider professional help. David knew he was failing them. Every parenting book he read, every expert he consulted, every well-meaning friend who offered advice, nothing worked. The twins needed more than he could give them, but he didn't know how to find it. That's when his sister suggested hiring a nanny. "You need professional help," she said during one of her visits. "Someone trained to deal with children who are grieving. Someone who can be there full-time while you work." The idea made sense. David could afford the best childcare money could buy. He started researching nannies the same way he researched business investments, thoroughly and methodically. He found agencies that specialized in high-net-worth families, nannies with advanced degrees in child development, and caregivers who spoke multiple languages. The first nanny, Patricia, arrived on a Monday morning with impressive credentials from a prestigious childcare institute. She had worked with grieving children before and came highly recommended. David felt hopeful for the first time in weeks as he showed her around the house and explained the twins' routines. Within an hour, Patricia was overwhelmed. Lily refused to speak to her and hid behind David's legs. Lucas threw his breakfast at her when she tried to help him eat. When David left for a meeting, both children started screaming and wouldn't stop until he returned. "They're very traumatized," Patricia told David that evening. "This might take longer than expected," but longer turned out to be exactly 5 days. On Friday afternoon, Patricia called David at work. "I'm sorry, but I can't continue. They've locked me out of the house, and I think Lily is trying to cut her own hair with safety scissors. This is beyond my experience level." David rushed home to find Patricia sitting on the front porch with her bags packed. The twins were indeed locked inside, refusing to open the door. When David finally got in using his key, he found Lily with choppy chunks of hair missing and Lucas hiding in his closet. That night, after the twins were finally asleep, David sat in his kitchen wondering if he was the worst father in the world. How could 2 4-year-olds defeat a professional nanny in less than a week? What was wrong with his children? What was wrong with him? He didn't know that this was just the beginning. He didn't know that 14 more nannies would come and go over the next 18 months. And he definitely didn't know that the answer to his problems was already in his house twice a week, quietly watching and understanding more than anyone realized. After Patricia's dramatic exit, David was more determined than ever to find the right person. He called the agency and explained that he needed someone with more experience with difficult children. They assured him that the next candidate would be perfect. Nanny number 2 was Margaret, a stern British woman in her 60s who had worked with royal families in Europe. She arrived with a detailed schedule, color-coded charts, and a no-nonsense attitude that David hoped would bring order to the chaos. "Children need structure," Margaret announced on her first day, posting a minute-by-minute schedule on the refrigerator. Breakfast at 7 sharp, educational activities from 9 to 11, quiet time from 1 to 3. The twins looked at the schedule like it was written in a foreign language. When Margaret tried to enforce educational time with flashcards and workbooks, Lily simply stared at the wall. Lucas ate the flashcards. When quiet time arrived, both children ran around the house screaming at the top of their lungs. Margaret lasted exactly 2 weeks before she declared the children completely undisciplined and left in a taxi, muttering about American parenting under her breath. Nanny number 3 took a different approach. Jennifer was young and energetic, fresh out of college with a degree in early childhood education. She believed in creative expression and letting children work through their emotions through art and play. "We're going to paint our feelings," Jennifer announced cheerfully, setting up easels in the playroom. This backfired spectacularly when Lily painted the walls, the furniture, and herself purple, while Lucas dumped all the paint containers on the floor and stomped through them. The playroom looked like a rainbow had exploded. Jennifer tried to stay positive. "Art is messy," she said, though David could see the panic in her eyes as she tried to clean purple handprints off his white leather couch. When Lucas started using paintbrushes as drumsticks on the piano keys, Jennifer quietly submitted her resignation that evening. The fourth nanny, Helen, came with references from 3 psychiatrists. She specialized in trauma therapy for children. and arrived with a suitcase full of therapeutic toys and books about grief. David felt hopeful again. Surely someone trained in childhood trauma could help his children. Helen tried to engage the twins in feelings conversations using puppet therapy. She had a sad puppet, a happy puppet, and an angry puppet, and she wanted the children to express their emotions through play. Instead, Lily fed all the puppets to their dog, Max, while Lucas used them as ammunition for an impromptu food fight. When Helen tried to read books about death and loss, the twins would scream and run away. When she attempted to create a memory box for their mother, they hid all the materials. After 3 weeks of failed therapy sessions and destroyed therapeutic toys, Helen admitted defeat. "They're not ready for traditional grief counseling," she told David. "Maybe in a few months when they're more stable." By nanny number 5, David was starting to lose hope. Each failure felt like another confirmation that he was a terrible father who couldn't even hire competent help for his children. The twins seemed to have developed a strategy for getting rid of caregivers, and they were getting better at it with each attempt. Nanny 5 was Maria, a middle-aged woman from Guatemala who spoke 3 languages and had raised 6 children of her own. David thought that maybe someone with more maternal experience would connect with Lily and Lucas better than the younger, more academic nannies. Maria was warm and patient, but the twins had perfected their resistance techniques by now. They would be perfect angels when David was home, then turn into completely different children the moment he left. Maria reported daily incidents: Lily locking herself in the bathroom for hours, Lucas refusing to wear clothes, both children hiding, her keys and phone. The breaking point came when Maria found both twins on the roof of the house, having climbed out through David's bedroom window. They weren't in any real danger. It was a low, flat section of roof, but Maria was terrified. When David came home to find the fire department in his driveway and his children being coaxed down by firefighters, Maria was already packing her bags. Nannies 6 through 10 blurred together in David's memory. There was the one who quit after. Lucas put honey in her shoes. The one who left when Lily convinced her that the house was haunted by making spooky noises in the walls. The one who packed up after both children pretended to be sick every single day for 2 weeks straight. One nanny lasted only 4 hours. She arrived in the morning, and by lunchtime she was calling her agency to say that the job was impossible, and the children were unmanageable. David never even learned her name. The worst part wasn't just the constant turnover. It was watching his children become more withdrawn and angry with each failed attempt. They were starting to believe that everyone would leave them just like their mother had. Each new nanny represented hope for a few days, then disappointment when the relationship inevitably fell apart. Rosa continued to come twice a week throughout this parade of nannies. She watched quietly as each new person tried and failed to connect with Lily and Lucas. She saw the children's behavior when the nannies were there versus when David was home. She noticed patterns that the rotating caregivers missed. Unlike the nannies, Rosa never tried to force the children to behave differently. When Lily wanted to hide under the dining room table during Rosa's cleaning days, Rosa would simply clean around her. When Lucas was having a tantrum, Rosa would continue her work calmly, occasionally offering a quiet, "It's okay to be sad," without trying to fix anything. The children seemed different when Rosa was there. Not perfect, they were still grieving and confused, but calmer somehow. They would follow her around the house, helping her fold laundry or dust shelves. Lily would chatter to Rosa in Spanish words she'd picked up from their previous nanny. Lucas would stack Rosa's cleaning supplies into neat piles. David noticed this but didn't think much of it. Rosa was there for only a few hours, twice a week. Managing children 24/7 was completely different from having them help with chores for an hour or two. By nanny number 11, David was starting to consider other options. Maybe he should move closer to his mother-in-law so she could help more. Maybe he should consider boarding school, though the children were far too young. Maybe he should sell his company and become a full-time father, though he had no idea how to do that successfully either. Each nanny brought new theories about what was wrong with the children. They had attachment issues. They had behavioral disorders. They needed medication. They needed therapy. They needed stricter discipline. They needed more freedom. The advice was contradictory and overwhelming. What nobody seemed to understand was that Lily and Lucas weren't bad children. They weren't trying to be difficult for the sake of being difficult. They were 4-year-olds whose entire world had been destroyed, and every new caregiver represented another person who might disappear from their lives. The twins had learned to protect themselves by pushing people away before they could be abandoned again. It was a survival strategy that made perfect sense from their perspective, even if it was driving away everyone who tried to help them. David was exhausted, frustrated, and running out of options when Nanny number 14 arrived. He barely had the energy to show her around the house or explain the children's routines. He just hoped she would last longer than a few days. But even he was surprised when she quit after only 6 hours, leaving a note that said simply, "I'm sorry, but I'm not qualified for this situation." That evening, David sat in his kitchen staring at another resignation letter and wondering what he was going to do next. Lily and Lucas were upstairs, probably plotting the downfall of whoever he hired next. Rosa was finishing up her cleaning, moving quietly through the house like she always did. He had no idea that his answer was about to come from the most unexpected source of all. Rosa had been watching this heartbreaking cycle for over a year. Every few weeks, a new nanny would arrive with confidence and credentials, only to leave defeated and frustrated. She saw how each failure affected not just David, but more importantly, the children. With every departure, Lily and Lucas seemed to retreat further into themselves. The day after Nanny number 14 quit, Rosa arrived for her usual Thursday cleaning to find David sitting at the kitchen table, still in his pajamas at noon. His laptop was closed, his phone was silent, and he was just staring out the window. This was unusual for a man who was typically on conference calls by 7 in the morning. "Mr. Thompson," Rosa said softly, "are you okay?" David looked up at her with eyes that seemed older than they had a year ago. "I don't know what to do anymore, Rosa. I've tried everything. The best agencies, the most qualified people, and my kids they hate everyone I bring here." Upstairs, they could hear Lily talking to herself in her room, having long conversations with her stuffed animals. Lucas was probably building towers with his blocks, then knocking them down over and over again. It was what he did when he was upset. "Maybe," Rosa said carefully. "They don't hate the people. Maybe they're just scared." David had heard this theory before from various experts, but something about the way Rosa said it made him really listen. Scared of what? Scared that everyone leaves, Rosa replied simply, like their mama did. That afternoon, Rosa found herself staying longer than usual. Instead of her typical 2-hour cleaning session, she was still there when the children came downstairs for their snack. Lily immediately went to Rosa and leaned against her legs while she wiped down the counters. "Rosa," Lily said quietly, "Daddy's sad again." "I know, sweetie," Rosa replied, continuing to work around Lily's small body pressed against her. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad too." Lucas wandered into the kitchen and started organizing Rosa's cleaning supplies, something he'd been doing for months. He would arrange the bottles by size, then by color, then start over again. Rosa let him do it because it seemed to calm him down. "Rosa," Lucas said suddenly, "are you going to leave too?" The question hung in the air. Rosa stopped wiping the counter and knelt down to Lucas's eye level. "I come here every Tuesday and Thursday, remember? I've been coming for a long time." "But the other ladies always leave," Lily said, her voice muffled against Rosa's uniform. "They say they're going to take care of us, but then they go away." Rosa felt her heart break a little. These children had been expecting abandonment for so long that they'd learned to cause it themselves. It was easier to push someone away than to risk being left again. That evening, Rosa knocked on David's office door. He was there late, catching up on work he'd missed during the day's crisis. She had never asked to speak with him privately before, and David could see she was nervous. "Mr. Thompson, can I talk to you about something?" "Of course, Rosa. What's on your mind?" Rosa took a deep breath. What she was about to suggest was unprecedented, and she wasn't sure how he would react. "I've been thinking about Lily and Lucas, about how they are with all these nannies." David nodded wearily. I know they're difficult. I'm going to try a different agency next week. Maybe find someone with more experience with traumatized children. That's not what I mean, Rosa said quickly. I think maybe they need someone who isn't going to be their nanny. David looked confused. I don't understand. Rosa had thought about this conversation for weeks, but she still wasn't sure how to put her thoughts into words. All these ladies come here to be their nanny. But to Lily and Lucas, that means someone new who's going to try to replace their mama, and they know no one can do that. So what are you suggesting? Rosa twisted her hands nervously. I know this might sound strange, but what if I took care of them? Not as their nanny, but just as Rosa, the person who's been here all along. David was quiet for a long moment. The idea had honestly never occurred to him. Rosa was the housekeeper. She cleaned and organized and occasionally helped with small tasks, but she wasn't a trained childcare professional. She didn't have degrees or certifications or references from other families. But as he thought about it, he realized something important. Rosa was the only person the children didn't try to drive away. She was the only constant in their lives. Besides him, Rosa, I don't know. You don't have experience as a full-time caregiver, and the pay would be completely different. Your responsibilities would be huge. Mr. Thompson, Rosa said quietly, I raised 4 kids by myself. I know it's not the same as having degrees, but I know children, and I know your children. David thought about all the expensive, highly qualified nannies who had failed. He thought about Lily leaning against Rosa in the kitchen and Lucas organizing her supplies. He thought about how the children seemed calmer on the days Rosa was there. Let me think about it, he said finally. That night, David called his sister to talk through the idea. Her reaction was immediate and negative. David, you can't be serious. Rosa is lovely, but she's not qualified to be a full-time nanny. What will people think? You're a successful businessman. You need someone with proper credentials. David knew. His sister meant well, but her words bothered him. What people thought seemed less important than what his children needed, and clearly all those proper credentials hadn't helped so far. He also called his mother-in-law, Catherine's mother, who had been helping when she could, but lived 2 hours away. Her response was different. That woman has been nothing but kind to those babies, she said. And she's the only person they don't seem to want to get rid of. Maybe that tells you something. The next morning, David made his decision. He called Rosa before she was scheduled to come to work. Rosa, I'd like to try your idea, but I want to start slowly. Maybe you could stay for full days a few times a week and we'll see how it goes. Rosa was quiet for so long that David wondered if the call had been disconnected. Finally, she spoke. Are you sure, Mr. Thompson? This is very different from cleaning. I'm sure. But Rosa, we're going to have to figure out a lot of things as we go. The children's schedules, your salary. What happens when I travel for work? Are you okay with that? Yes, Rosa said simply. I am. The first full day was a test for everyone. David explained to Lily and Lucas that Rosa was going to spend the whole day with them while he worked. Unlike previous announcements about new caregivers, this one didn't cause panic or protests. Is Rosa going to be our new nanny? Lily asked. No, David said carefully. Rosa is just going to be Rosa. She's going to take care of you, but she's not trying to be anyone else. Lucas looked thoughtful. So she's not going to leave? She's not planning to leave, David said honestly. But Lucas, I can't promise that. Nothing will ever change. What I can promise is that we'll always tell you the truth about what's happening. That first day wasn't perfect. There were still tears and tantrums and moments of confusion. But there was something different too. When Lily had a meltdown about wearing shoes, Rosa didn't try to force her or distract her or analyze why she was upset. She just sat nearby and waited for the storm to pass. When Lucas refused to eat lunch, Rosa didn't turn it into a battle. She wrapped up his sandwich and said, "Okay, it'll be here when you're hungry." These small moments of acceptance rather than control seemed to confuse the children at first. They were so used to every adult trying to fix them or change them or make them behave differently. Rosa just let them be sad and angry and scared. By the end of that first full day, both children were exhausted but calmer. When David came home from work, he found Rosa reading a story while Lily and Lucas sat on either side of her on the couch. It was the most peaceful scene he'd witnessed in his house in over a year. "How did it go?" he asked Rosa quietly while the children played nearby. "It was good," she said simply. "They're good kids, Mr. Thompson, they're just hurt." Over the next few weeks, Rosa gradually took on more responsibilities. She learned the children's medical information, their favorite foods, their bedtime routines. She figured out that Lily needed extra time to wake up in the morning, and that Lucas concentrated better when he could fidget with small objects. But the real test came when David had to leave town for a business trip. It was only 2 days, but it would be the first time since Catherine's death that he'd left the children overnight with someone other than family. The night before he left, both children were anxious and clingy. They'd been abandoned by their mother, even though it wasn't her choice, and now Daddy was leaving too, even though it was only temporary. "I'll be back on Wednesday," David told them at bedtime. "Rosa will be here with you the whole time. And you can call me whenever you want." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "What if you don't come back?" David's heart broke. "Oh, sweetheart, I will always come back to you. Always." But he knew that promises from adults probably didn't mean much to children who'd already lost one parent. The real question was whether Rosa could handle 2 grieving children on her own for 48 hours, or if this would be the moment that everything fell apart. David's business trip felt like the longest 2 days of his life. He called home 3 times on Tuesday alone, expecting to hear chaos or tears or Rosa asking him to come back early. Instead, he heard something unexpected. Normal childhood sounds in the background. "Everything is fine, Mr. Thompson," Rosa assured him during his evening check-in. "We made cookies today. Well, mostly we made a mess, but we had fun." When David returned on Wednesday afternoon, he walked into a house that felt different. Not perfect. There were still toys scattered everywhere, and evidence of the cookie-making adventure Rosa had mentioned. But there was something lighter in the air. Lily and Lucas ran to him with genuine excitement, not the desperate clinging he'd gotten used to. They babbled about their 2 days with Rosa, talking over each other to tell him about the cookies, a movie they'd watched, and how Rosa had taught them a song in Spanish. "And Rosa didn't leave," Lucas announced proudly, as if this was the most amazing accomplishment in the world. That night, after the children were asleep, David asked Rosa how she'd managed so well. Her answer was simple. "I just treated them like kids, not like broken things that needed fixing." Over the following weeks, Rosa continued to do things differently than all the previous nannies. When Lily had nightmares, Rosa didn't try to analyze them or make them stop. She just sat by Lily's bed and hummed soft songs until the little girl fell back asleep. When Lucas had anger outbursts, Rosa didn't try to reason with him or put him in timeout. She just made sure he was safe and waited for the storm to pass. The breakthrough moment came about 6 weeks into Rosa's new role. David was in his office when he heard Lily screaming upstairs. Not unusual, but this sounded different. He was about to go investigate when he heard Rosa's calm voice and decided to listen from the hallway instead. "I want my mommy," Lily was sobbing. "I want her to come back, it's not fair." Instead of trying to comfort her or explain that mommy couldn't come back, Rosa said something that surprised David. "You're right. It's not fair at all." "It's not?" Lily's crying slowed down a little. "No, sweetie. It's not fair that your mama died. It's not fair that you're sad all the time. It's not fair that everything changed. You're absolutely right to be angry about it." David held his breath. No one had ever validated the children's anger before. Everyone had focused on helping them accept their loss or move through their grief stages. But Rosa was saying it was okay to be furious about what had happened to them. "I miss her so much," Lily whispered. "I know you do. And that's okay too. Missing someone means you loved them very much." That conversation marked a turning point. Over the next few months, both children began to open up to Rosa in ways they never had with anyone else. She became their safe person, the adult they could tell their worst fears and angriest thoughts to without being judged or corrected. Lucas, who had been largely nonverbal about his feelings, started talking to Rosa about his worries. He was afraid that David would die too. He was afraid that if he loved anyone too much, they would disappear. He was afraid that he was bad because sometimes he felt angry at his mother for leaving, even though he knew it wasn't her fault. Rosa listened to all of it without trying to fix or change his feelings. "It's scary when someone you love dies," she told him. "It makes you worry that it might happen again, that's normal." Lily, meanwhile, began to share her memories of Catherine with Rosa. She would tell long, rambling stories about things she and her mother used to do together. Rosa encouraged these conversations, asking questions and helping Lily keep her mother's memory alive, instead of trying to help her move on. One afternoon, Rosa suggested they make a special box for Lily and Lucas to keep things that reminded them of their mother. Unlike the therapeutic memory boxes that previous nannies had attempted, this was the children's idea of what should go inside. Lily contributed a hair clip that still smelled like Catherine's perfume. Lucas added a small stone from their garden that he said looked like a heart. They included photos, a ticket stub from a movie they'd seen together, and a recipe card in Catherine's handwriting for chocolate chip cookies. The memory box wasn't about closure or moving through grief stages. It was about honoring their mother and acknowledging that she would always be part of their lives, even though she wasn't physically there anymore. David watched these changes with amazement and, if he was honest, a little guilt. How had Rosa figured out what his children needed when all the trained professionals had failed? How had she known to validate their anger instead of trying to eliminate it? The answer became clear one evening when Rosa was helping Lily with a puzzle. Lily was getting frustrated because she couldn't find the right pieces, and she started to have one of her familiar meltdowns. "This is stupid," Lily yelled, sweeping puzzle pieces off the table. "I hate this. I hate everything." Instead of trying to calm her down or teach her about appropriate behavior, Rosa said quietly, "Sometimes when I'm really sad about something else, little things like puzzles make me even more upset. Is that what's happening?" Lily stopped mid-tantrum and looked at Rosa with surprise. "How did you know?" "Because I'm a grown-up, and that still happens to me sometimes. When I'm worried about my own kids or missing my mama who died when I was little, even easy things feel too hard." David realized that Rosa understood his children because she'd experienced loss herself. She wasn't trying to apply textbook theories about grief. She was drawing from her own life experience and treating Lily and Lucas as real people with valid emotions, not problems to be solved. As the months passed, the changes in the children became more obvious to everyone. They started sleeping through the night more often. They began to engage in activities they used to enjoy. Lucas started building elaborate block towers again instead of just knocking them down. Lily began drawing pictures that weren't just dark scribbles. Most importantly, they stopped trying to drive Rosa away. There were still difficult days, still tears and tantrums and moments of overwhelming sadness. But these felt different now. They felt like normal childhood emotions rather than desperate attempts to control an uncontrollable situation. The children also started talking about the future again. Lily mentioned wanting to learn to ride a bike. Lucas asked if they could plant flowers in the garden like they used to do with Mommy. These were small signs, but they meant everything to David. Rosa's approach wasn't just helping the children, it was helping David too. She encouraged him to talk about Catherine with Lily and Lucas instead of avoiding the subject. She helped him understand that his children didn't need him to be perfect. They needed him to be honest about his own sadness and confusion. "It's okay for them to see you cry sometimes," Rosa told him one day. "They need to know that missing their mama is normal, and that even grown-ups feel sad about it." The first time David cried in front of his children was terrifying for him, but their reaction surprised him. Instead of being scared or upset, they climbed onto his lap and hugged him. "We're all sad about Mama," Lily said simply, "but we have each other." 6 months after Rosa became their full-time caregiver, David realized he couldn't remember the last time either child had had a major meltdown. There were still bad days, still moments of grief and confusion, but the constant chaos and desperation were gone. The children had learned to trust again, starting with Rosa and extending gradually to David and other people in their lives. They were still healing, still figuring out how to live in a world without their mother. But they were doing it with support instead of fighting it alone. Rosa had accomplished what 15 trained nannies couldn't. She had given 2 grieving children permission to feel their feelings while slowly, patiently, teaching them that not everyone would abandon them. The transformation wasn't complete yet, but for the first time since Catherine's death, David believed that his family was going to be okay. Not the same as before, that was impossible, but okay in a new way that honored their loss while still allowing for happiness and hope. And it was all because a quiet housekeeper had seen what others missed, that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is simply treat children as human beings whose pain deserves respect rather than elimination. 2 years after Rosa became the children's full-time caregiver, David could barely recognize the family they'd become. The house that had once felt chaotic and broken now buzzed with the kind of normal childhood energy he'd forgotten was possible. Lily, now 6, had grown into a confident little girl who talked constantly and asked a million questions about everything. She still missed her mother and had sad days, but she'd learned to talk about those feelings instead of acting them out through tantrums and defiance. She'd also developed a special bond with Rosa that amazed everyone who saw it. Rosa taught me that it's okay to be sad and happy at the same time, Lily explained to her grandfather one day with the serious wisdom that only children possess. Like, I can miss Mama but still have fun playing with my friends. Lucas had transformed, even more dramatically. The angry, silent little boy had become curious and talkative, though still more reserved than his sister. He'd developed a passion for building things and could spend hours constructing elaborate cities with his blocks and toy cars. When he felt overwhelmed, he'd learn to ask for what he needed instead of exploding into rage. The breakthrough that showed David how far they'd all come happened during Lily's 6th birthday party. As they were planning the celebration, Lily had asked if they could include something special for Mama. "I want to have Mama's favorite cake," she said. "Even though she can't eat it, maybe she can see it from heaven." Instead of feeling sad about this request, David felt grateful. His daughter was finding ways to include her mother in happy moments rather than feeling guilty for having joy without her. When Rosa suggested they each share a favorite memory of Catherine before cutting the cake, it felt natural rather than forced. At the party, surrounded by friends and family, Lucas stood up with his piece of cake and said loudly, "I want to tell Mama thank you for giving me the best daddy and the best Rosa." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, but they were tears of healing rather than despair. The changes weren't just emotional. Practically speaking, their household ran more smoothly than it ever had, even when Catherine was alive. Rosa had figured out systems that worked for their specific family. She knew that Lily needed extra time in the morning, but could handle more independence in the afternoon. She knew that Lucas needed clear expectations, but also flexibility when his emotions overwhelmed him. David's work life had stabilized too. He no longer worried constantly about what chaos he might find when he came home. He could travel for business when necessary, knowing that Rosa had everything under control. More importantly, he'd learned to be present when he was home instead of being distracted by stress and guilt. The relationship between David and Rosa had evolved into something neither of them had expected. She wasn't just an employee, she was a partner in raising the children and a trusted advisor on everything from school decisions to discipline strategies. David had increased her salary significantly and given her full health benefits, but more than that, he'd made it clear that she was family. "I don't know what we would have done without you," he told her one evening as they watched the children play in the backyard. "You saved us, Rosa." Rosa shook her head. "You all saved each other. I just helped a little bit." But David knew it was more than that. Rosa had brought something to their family that all the professional training in the world couldn't provide. The wisdom that comes from understanding pain and the patience that comes from genuine love. The ripple effects of Rosa's approach extended beyond their immediate family. David's mother-in-law, who had initially been skeptical about the arrangement, became one of Rosa's biggest supporters. "That woman understands children in a way that can't be taught," she told David. "Lily and Lucas are lucky to have her." David's sister, who had worried about appearances and qualifications, eventually admitted she'd been wrong. "I was so focused on credentials that I forgot about character," she said. "Rosa has something more valuable than any degree." The children's teachers at school noticed the changes too. Lily went from being withdrawn and disruptive to being one of the most engaged students in her class. Lucas, who had struggled with emotional regulation, became known for his kindness and his ability to help other children when they were upset. "Whatever you're doing at home is working," Lily's teacher told David during a parent conference. "She's confident, empathetic, and resilient. Those are gifts that will serve her well for the rest of her life." As the children grew older, they began to understand more about what made Rosa special. Lily, now reading chapter books, found stories about loss and healing that resonated with her own experience. She would bring these books to Rosa to discuss, and Rosa would share her own stories about growing up poor, losing her own mother young, and raising 4 children as a single parent. "Rosa knows what it feels like to have hard things happen," Lily explained to David one day. "That's why she's so good at helping us feel better." Lucas, meanwhile, had become Rosa's shadow in many ways. He helped her with household tasks and asked endless questions about her life and her own children. Rosa taught him simple phrases in Spanish and shared stories about her homeland. Through these conversations, Lucas learned that families come in all different forms and that love isn't limited by biology. The memory box they'd created for Catherine had evolved too. Instead of being a static collection of mementos, it had become a living tribute that grew with the children. They added new items regularly: drawings they'd made for Mama, photos from special occasions they wished she could have attended, and letters they wrote to her on important days. Rosa encouraged this ongoing relationship with their mother's memory. "Love doesn't end when someone dies," she told them. "It just changes form. You can still love Mama and talk to her in your heart whenever you want." 3 years into their new arrangement, David made a decision that would have seemed impossible. In the dark days after Catherine's death, he proposed to Rosa. Not romantically. Their relationship had always been professional and familial. But he asked her to officially adopt the children so that if anything ever happened to him, they would be legally protected and could stay with the person who knew them best. Rosa was overwhelmed by the gesture. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Lily piped up from the doorway where she'd been eavesdropping. "We want you to be our official Rosa forever." Lucas nodded seriously. "You're already our family anyway. This just makes it more official." The legal adoption process was complex but emotional in the best way. Lily and Lucas testified to the judge about how much Rosa meant to them and how safe and loved they felt in her care. The judge, clearly moved by their testimony, fast-tracked the process. On the day the adoption became official, they celebrated with Catherine's favorite cake and a new tradition. Each family member shared something they were grateful for. David was grateful for second chances and the wisdom to recognize what his children truly needed. Rosa was grateful for the opportunity to love and be loved by children who had taught her as much as she'd taught them. Lily was grateful that, even when really sad things happen, good things can still come after. And Lucas, now 8 and increasingly thoughtful, was grateful that families can be made in different ways. But they're all real families if there's love. Looking back, David realized that the greatest gift Rosa had given them wasn't just stability or care. It was the understanding that healing doesn't mean forgetting or moving on. It means learning to carry love and loss together, finding ways to honor the past while building hope for the future. The children still talked about their mother regularly. They still had sad days and moments of grief. But these emotions no longer controlled their lives or defined their identity. They had learned through Rosa's patient guidance that they could be whole people who happened to have experienced great loss, rather than broken people who needed constant fixing. 5 years after that first desperate day when David thought his world was ending, he stood in his kitchen, watching Rosa teach his children how to make tamales for Christmas. Lily was covered in flour. Lucas was carefully measuring ingredients, and Rosa was laughing at something one of them had said. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was a good life. It was a life built on love, patience, and the revolutionary idea that sometimes the most qualified person for a job isn't the one with the most impressive resume. It's the one with the biggest heart and the deepest understanding of what it means to be human. And in that moment, David understood something profound. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who've been quietly watching and caring all along, waiting for the moment when we're ready to see what we truly need rather than what we think we want. Rosa had given them all a second chance at being a family. Not the same family they'd been before, but something new and strong and beautiful in its own way. And that, David realized, was the greatest gift anyone could give.